Dark clouds are hanging over Europe. The European people have been utterly betrayed by their elite. The magnitude of this conspiracy is unprecedented in human history. Our ruling elite has turned out to be a mere corrupt lackey of global capitalism. These high-priced parasites have stolen the Europeans, their livelihood, their land, their future, and their self-esteem. These prostitutes of the corporate world have exposed Europe to an endless rampage of brutal beggars and forcefully denied Europeans any means of defending themselves. We have become powerless. We have lost control over our lives. We are denied our place in this world, and our spirit is waning. What once was ours has been taken away and given to greedy aliens. What we once held sacred is ridiculed and mocked by arrogant intruders. What once was familiar to us has now been degenerated into something strange and threatening. For decades, Europeans have been taught to hate and despise themselves. Generations of Europeans have been brought up believing that the world would be a better place without them. They have been brought up to feel the crushing weight of the white man's endless guilt. Europeans are constantly reminded that only through self-destruction can they pay for the sins of their civilization. The death of Europe is the fashion of the day, our demise a sign of progress. The disintegration of the traditional Europe a way forward, the predatory invasions against Europe only the latest trend, self-hatred a sure sign of intellectual thinking. We are called to celebrate the physical, intellectual, cultural and spiritual collapse of our civilization. We have already been brainwashed to believe that the collapse is inevitable and that it is a law of nature that we should die out and the barbarian hordes at our gates should win. Under the disguise of liberalism, humanism and democracy, Europeans have been persuaded to commit an ethnic suicide. A race that has achieved so much and has survived so much has been tricked to welcome its own downfall and to take active measures in order to become a stranger on its own soil. We are witnessing the most vicious and cruel conspiracy in history, the conspiracy to replace the European people, a systematic campaign to wipe out the Europeans from the existence.
Dann gibt es ja noch was. Jedes Jahr sterben mehr Deutsche als geboren werden. Das liegt zum Glück daran, dass die Nazis sich auch nicht besonders vervielfältigen.
First by socially degenerating the people and then through mental and physical retardation to paralyze the ability of the people to resist, to poison the very biological stock where all the great deeds of the past once grew, so that in the end a herd of geldings would be easier to usher to their death rather than the once proud race of warriors, craftsmen and explorers. As our situation deteriorates, the harsh realities of life will force the European people to open their eyes. We will show them. Let the whole world know that Europeans refuse to die.
Social justice, feminism, neo-progressivism, and post-colonialism, to name but a few, are all movements inspired by or born out of critical theory, and thus all come under the umbrella of cultural Marxism. Be it gender, sexual orientation, family, race, culture, or religion, every aspect of a person's identity is to be questioned, every norm or standard in society challenged, and ideally altered in order to benefit supposedly oppressed groups. Theodor Adorno, another original member of the Frankfurt School, wrote a book entitled The Authoritarian Personality, in which he defined parenthood, pride in one's family, Christianity, adherence to traditional gender roles and attitudes towards sex, and the love of one's own country as pathological phenomena. This tendency to pathologize opinions and life patterns, which are not in accordance with its own political ends, is characteristic of cultural Marxism.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
Of course, I'm called every name in the book by the real racial supremacists who control the media, the globalist media. But for the last 45 years of my life, I've been teaching and preaching that multiculturalism will fail, that it will create huge social conflict. But what is the result of open borders and ignoring human diversity? Now, even leaders like Merkel, Cameron, Sarkozy, and others admit that multiculturalism has miserably failed.
Won't stay long. One day they'll be gone. But this is not the case. Of course, the multicultural approach, living side by side and being happy with each other, this approach has failed utterly.
My response is clearly yes, it's a failure. The truth is that in all our democracies we've been too preoccupied with the identity of those arriving and not enough with that of the countries which welcome them.
Look at the conflict and hatred that has been created by simply not recognizing and accepting human realities and differences. We cannot make this go away with globalist propaganda.